Life felt ordinary until the property dispute erupted. Her husband and mother-in-law were utterly convinced of their impending victory, meticulously planning and already mentally dividing the apartment. They had no inkling, however, of the trump card their adversary held. A year prior, while clearing out an old garage, she had stumbled upon a worn-out notebook, a veritable family archive brimming with secrets. Greetings, dear listeners. It's a pleasure to welcome you to my channel. I have a captivating news story for you today. I hope you enjoy it. Xenia arrived home late from work, her shoulder aching from the weight of a grocery bag. Her feet throbbed after a long shift at the beauty salon. All she yearned for was a shower and her couch. But even on the landing, she heard her mother-in-law's familiar voice. Lyudmila Borisovna had arrived unannounced, as usual. "Igor, you need to think this through," she heard from behind the door. "This is essentially your apartment. You're registered here. You pay the utilities." Ksenia froze, her keys in her hand. "Mom, what does that have to do with anything?" Igor's voice, though weary, was unperturbed, lacking any defense, as usual. Quote 3. Ksenia flung the door open. Her mother-in-law sat at the kitchen table, looking like the lady of the house. Her favorite mug, filled with steaming tea, sat before her. Igor stood by the window, avoiding her gaze. Quote 4. Ksenia said, placing her bag on the floor. Quote 5. Quote 6. Igor finally turned. Quote 7. Quote 8. He rubbed the back of his neck. Quote 9. Ksenia slowly took off her jacket. The apartment was hers, a one-bedroom in a 9-story panel building, purchased with maternity capital and a loan she had been diligently repaying for the past 7 years. This was before she met Igor. He had moved in 3 years ago after their wedding with 2 suitcases and a promise that from then on, everything would be 50-50. 50-50 never materialized. Igor worked as a manager at a construction firm, earning a decent salary, but the money seemed to vanish into thin air. It was always for car repairs, trips with friends, or helping his mother. Xenia paid off the mortgage herself last year. Igor had been between projects at the time. _10_, she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. Quote 11. Lyudmila Borisovna narrowed her eyes. Quote 12. Quote 13. Quote 14. Ksenia recalled that renovation. Igor had spent 2 weekends painting the room walls. She had bought the paint. Then, for a week, he acted like a hero. Quote 15, her voice was steady. Quote 16, quote 17, quote 18. Igor raised his voice, though not very convincingly. Quote 19, her mother-in-law pursed her lips, finished her tea, and retreated to the bedroom, where she settled on the sofa with her phone. Ksenia began unpacking the groceries, her hands trembling. Igor approached her from behind and embraced her. Quote 20, quote 21, quote 22. He pulled away, and something cold flickered in his eyes. Ksenia remained silent, realizing that arguing was futile. Lyudmila Borisovna would leave in a day or 2, and everything would return to its usual rhythm. It had always been that way. But this time, her mother-in-law stayed. A week, then another. She occupied the spare room, commandeered half the wardrobe, and cooked meals that Igor loved but Ksenia couldn't stand. In the mornings, Lyudmila Borisovna would emerge from the bathroom precisely when Xenia needed to get ready for work. She monopolized the television in the evenings, discussing family matters with her son, from which Ksenia was deliberately excluded. "Do you remember Uncle Borya Kondakov?" her mother-in-law asked over dinner. "He lives in Tula. Well, he's selling his house, wants to move to Moscow to be with his daughter. I was thinking maybe we could buy it. The price is ridiculous, and the plot is huge." Ksenia cut into a meatball she hadn't asked for and didn't want, listening as her mother-in-law and her son planned their shared future. "Mom, I don't have that kind of money," Igor chuckled. "But Ksenia does." Lyudmila Borisovna stared intently at her. "You could sell your apartment." It's small anyway. You can't really spread out. And there's a house, land. Where will you raise children?" Ksenia's breath hitched. Her mother-in-law triumphantly raised a finger. Igor remained silent, eating his meatball, his eyes fixed on his plate. Ksenia called out. He shrugged. Her mother-in-law smirked. Quote 39. Ksenia pushed away from the table, went to the bathroom, locked the door, and turned on the water to drown out the ensuing conversation. She sat on the edge of the tub, clutching her head. These intrusions used to be rare, sporadic. Now they were daily, and Igor wouldn't defend her. He just remained silent, which was almost worse. Lyudmila Borisovna left 3 weeks later, but she had sown the seeds. Igor became different, withdrawn, resentful. His answers to questions were monosyllabic. He spent his evenings at friends' places. One day, Ksenia opened his laptop. He had forgotten to log out of his email and saw a correspondence with his mother. Quote 40. Quote 41. Ksenia slammed the laptop shut. Her heart pounded. A lawyer. They were planning to take her apartment through the courts. For several days, she moved through life in a fog, observing her husband, catching his glances. Igor behaved with exaggerated normalcy, kissed her goodbye, asked how she was, even brought her flowers. But something had changed. A cold calculation appeared in his eyes. Ksenia started Googling, reading forums, consulting with lawyers. She learned that an apartment purchased before marriage remained personal property. However, if a spouse could prove they had contributed to it, made expensive renovations, or paid off the mortgage, they could claim compensation or even a share. Igor had no proof. She knew this for certain, but her mother-in-law was inventive. They could fabricate receipts, find fake witnesses. Fear drove her deeper into the forums until she stumbled upon the story of a woman who won her case thanks to accidentally discovered documents. And then Ksenia remembered the garage. A year ago, in May, she and Igor had gone to his mother's dacha to clear out the old garage. Lyudmila Borisovna was planning construction. The garage was to be demolished. The junk needed to be removed. Ksenia rummaged through boxes of jars, rags, and rusty tools. In a corner, behind a stack of bald tires, she found a worn-out notebook with a plastic cover. She opened it out of boredom. It contained entries, columns of numbers, dates, sums, in Lyudmila Borisovna's old-fashioned, neat handwriting, but from a younger version. The first pages were dated in the 1990s. Quote 42. Ksenia had flipped through it then, smirked. So her mother-in-law had been scheming her whole life. She tucked the notebook into her bag without any particular purpose. At home, she put it away on the mezzanine. Now she remembered. That evening, after Igor had gone to a friend's, Ksenia took out the notebook, sat at the table with tea, opened it, and leafed through it slowly. Here in the 2000s, gave Igor $30,000 for university, said it was all I had, $12,000 left in the account, let him not know. Further on, Victor asked for $50,000 for medical treatment. I'll give him 20, say I have no more, the rest for a rainy day. Victor, Lyudmila Borisovna's late husband, Igor's father, had died about 10 years ago of a heart attack. Ksenia read on, her face hardening. Here were entries about how her mother-in-law had deceived her husband, hidden money, lied to her son. Here was a page dated the year Victor died. Victor asked me to call an ambulance, but I waited until morning. It's expensive at night. By morning, he was worse. I called. We didn't make it in time. Ksenia went cold, reread it. They didn't make it in time because Lyudmila Borisovna had begrudged the money for a night call. Next were notes about the inheritance, how she sold Victor's dacha and told no one, about how she convinced Igor to renounce his share of property in favor of his mother, persuading him it was the right thing to do. And then, much more recent entries. The last one, from 3 months ago. Igor married this Ksenia. The fool thinks the apartment is hers. We need to proceed carefully. Gennady Shubin says we can go through the courts. Igor is registered, pays the utilities. We'll find witnesses that he contributed. I've already spoken to a couple of people. They'll say he bought building materials, did renovations. Ksenia won't even realize how she'll lose everything. Then they'll divorce, and the apartment will go to Igor, and therefore, to me. Ksenia sat motionless, her ears ringing. So this wasn't just an idea. It was a plan, detailed, well thought out. And Igor was aware. She photographed the pages with her phone. Everything, from the first to the last. Then she hid the notebook back. For 2 weeks she remained silent, observing. Igor became even more distant, didn't touch her, slept turned away. One day, she overheard him talking on the phone in the hallway. "Mom, Gennady said we should file in October. We'll gather everything we need. Don't worry, she has no idea." October, in a month's time. Ksenia scheduled a consultation with a lawyer. She found Mark Stanislavovich Drozdov, a man in his 40s with intelligent, tired eyes based on reviews. She showed him the photographs of the notebook. Drozdov read them, frowned, and shook his head. Ksenia said wearily. The lawsuit arrived at the beginning of November. Igor demanded recognition of his ownership of half the apartment. The grounds, contributions to renovation, cohabitation, payment of utilities. Attached were the testimonies of 2 witnesses, Igor's friends who swore they saw him buying laminate flooring, wallpaper and paint to the tune of about 300,000 rubles. Ksenia read the lawsuit in the kitchen. Igor stood by the door watching her intently. "Ksai, it's just a formality. I have a right." "Shut up," she said quietly. "What? Shut up and get out. Pack your things and leave. Today you have no right to evict me. I am registered here." "I'm evicting you. And if you're not gone in an hour, I'll call the police." Igor attempted to protest, but something in her expression silenced him. He packed a bag and slammed the door. Ksenia locked herself in, sat on the floor in the hallway, and finally cried. The trial was set for December. Lyudmila Borisovna and Igor hired the aforementioned Gennady Shubin, a burly man with oily eyes. He confidently laid out the papers, smiling. Ksenia had Drozdov, thin, in a worn suit with a battered briefcase. Shubin spoke about how Igor had contributed to the apartment for 3 years, renovated it, and provided for the family. The witnesses, 2 young men Ksenia recognized from Igor's birthday, swore they had seen the receipts and paint cans with their own eyes. Drozdov listened in silence. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a weary face, also remained silent, taking notes. When Shubin finished, Drozdov stood up. Lyudmila Borisovna flinched. Igor turned pale. Asked Judge Ushubina. "Quote 62, Shubin muttered. Drozdov took out the notebook and opened it. Quote 63, quote 64. And he began to read slowly, clearly, in a steady voice. Lyudmila Borisovna froze. Her face was white. Igor jumped up. The judge said coldly, quote 69. Drozdov turned the pages. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Shubin sat, red as a boiled lobster. Lyudmila Borisovna clutched her bag. Igor stared at the floor. Quote 70. Drozdov closed the notebook. Quote 71. The judge took the notebook, leafed through it. Her expression grew sterner. Quote 72, she looked at Shubin. Quote 73, Lyudmila Borisovna rushed out of the courtroom first. Igor shuffled after her, not meeting anyone's eyes. Ksenia stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trembling. A week later, the decision was announced. The lawsuit was fully dismissed. Igor Gromov was ordered to pay Ksenia 30,000 rubles in court costs. In the reasoned opinion, the judge harshly criticized the falsification of evidence and abuse of rights. Igor called a month later. His voice was hoarse, unfamiliar. "Casey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Mom made me do it." "You're an adult, Igor." "I know, but can we meet, talk?" "No." Ksenia hung up and blocked his number. In the spring, Ksenia filed for divorce. Igor did not appear in court. The divorce was granted in absentia. In the summer, she met him by chance near the metro. He was walking with some girl, laughing. He saw Ksenia and froze. She walked past without stopping. A year later, she sold the apartment. Not because she wanted to, but because she decided to. She bought a 2-bedroom in a new building, bright, with panoramic windows. Her friends, colleagues, and her younger sister with her nephews came to her housewarming. She kept the notebook in a safe. One day, almost 2 years after the trial, Ksenia went to a cafe on the corner of her street. She sat by the window with a cappuccino, scrolling through social media, then looked up and froze. At the next table sat Lyudmila Borisovna, alone, aged, with gray roots and a cheap bag on her knees. She ordered tea, rummaged in her wallet for a long time, counting small change. Ksenia looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, felt neither anger nor resentment, only emptiness. Her mother-in-law looked up, met her gaze. She recognized her. For a second, something flickered across her face. Fear, shame, but she quickly turned away, finished her tea, and hurried out, not looking back. Ksenia finished her coffee, paid, and went home. To her bright new apartment, where a laptop with an open business administration course awaited her on the table, she decided to get a second degree, and where a photo of her and her friends at the seaside hung on the refrigerator. The notebook had long ceased to mean anything. It lay in the safe like an old receipt, like someone else's story. Ksenia never saw Igor or his mother again. Sometimes, passing by her old 9-story building, she would stop and look at the first-floor windows. A light was on. Other people lived there. She walked on to where no one encroached on her space or made plans behind her back.